Thank you all for attending today. This will be a 1-hour maximum webinar today on the Global Seafood Alliance's newly published and released Seafood Processing Standard Issue 6.0. Thank you everyone who's attending today for your attention. I'd also like to thank anyone who's been involved in the redevelopment of this seafood processing standard outside of GSA, including technical committee members, anyone who issued public comments, facilities who have been involved in this process. It takes a large group of stakeholders to do standards updates like this. So we're very appreciative of everyone's time and interest in this update. So today, as I mentioned, we'll be going through this new standard. We'll have 3 speakers for you today, starting with myself. I'm David Dietz. I am GSA's Manager of Standards Oversight. I'll be going through the overall presentation of the new standard today, and then with me I have 2 colleagues to help join in the Q&A session that will follow the presentation. So joining me is GSA's Director of Social Responsibility, Amy McGann, and our Program Integrity Consultant, Morali Buji. So they will be online and available at the end to help answer questions related to the standard. So with that, a few housekeeping items. Everyone will be muted for the duration of this webinar. We'll be using chat for communications. However, anyone who has registered, including those who did not log in today, will get a recording of this presentation. If you do have questions, please type them into the chat box. It should be at the bottom right of your screen. GSA staff will be looking at those in the back end to help publish them online. And at the end of this presentation, we will go through and do a moderated Q&A session. So if you post a question, don't be confused if you don't see it get posted. They just get sent to the back end for us. And lastly, again, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. So what we're going to go through today is just a quick reminder of what the current version of SPS, version 5.1, really what was the reason for making such a significant overhaul to the standard design from issue 5.1, discuss what those new features of issue 6.0 are, and then we're going to go through the components of the standard one by one here as we've moved towards what we'll describe in the future as a modular concept. We have broken this down into various components. So we'll go through each of those to help you understand the new structure and content of the standard. And lastly, as I mentioned, we will go through a moderated Q&A session where we will try to get through as many questions about the standard and its implementation as possible. So just to start with a reminder of where we're at now and where we're going. Some of the feedback that we've received over the current issue of the Seafood Processing Standard issue 5.1 that ultimately started this redevelopment process. Firstly, the standard was starting to get as a single document a little too long, and the number of clauses was getting quite high. With that, there were many clauses within the standard that were not necessarily applicable to every facility. So facilities were having to deal with clauses and standard elements that might not necessarily relate to their operations at all. However, there was still quite a bit of positive feedback around making sure that the standard covers all 4 pillars of responsible seafood. So environmental responsibility, social accountability, food safety, and animal health and welfare. But again, with these varying types of facilities that we are auditing, we found that we were not necessarily utilizing auditors as efficiently as possible, as there are different competency requirements depending on the type of facility we're looking at. And lastly, there was also some feedback that over time, many of the clauses within SPS 5.1 individually had gotten a little too long or wordy, and that the interpretation of certain individual clauses was very difficult for both facilities and auditors. So for all of these reasons and many more, GSA took upon itself a multi-year journey to redesign the seafood processing standard while still keeping the same assurances that live within it. So, as I mentioned, the objective here is to revise the seafood processing standard to a new version that accomplishes all the same previous goals, but really specifically focused on the following, which is an improvement of audit efficiency for facilities undergoing seafood processing standard audits. So, terms of relevant clause burden, audit duration, things of that nature. Making a standard that is more supportive toward wild capture processing facilities. As GSA has engaged more and more heavily with the wild capture segment of the seafood industry, we have recognized the ways in which wild capture processors may differentiate or have specific needs or restrictions. And this standard is much more in line with those expectations and requirements for the wild capture industry. Again, beyond just wild capture processors, this standard's much more customized for the specific facility under assessment. So you're going to get a much more tailored clause checklist depending on what your operations are. Looking towards external benchmarks. The seafood processing standard has been historically benchmarked to the Global Food Safety Initiative. It is the intention and the design of this standard that it will maintain that benchmark for any facility certified to the seafood processing standard. I'll touch on that a little bit more later. We're also working towards making a version of this certification eligible for the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative benchmark, which is another Consumer Goods Forum benchmark recognizing best practice, social accountability, and worker welfare schemes. Lastly here, which was something that we had been in discussion with facilities and certification bodies alike over the years, is that we will now be folding in complete compliance guidance for auditors and facilities within the standard. So within the audit checklist that comes with it, there is clause by clause guidance discussing the intent of clauses and the ways that compliance can potentially be demonstrated. Without further ado, this is the final design of SPS 6.0. We'll go through each of these components individually, so I just want to look at this quickly as one single photo. In the center there, you see the large blue rectangle called core. That is the main central requirements that every facility applying to the seafood processing standard will be audited against. The core benchmark was designed to be clauses that would be relevant to any facility conducting any type of seafood processing. And the goal is that all of the components of the GFSI benchmark are found within those core requirements, so that the core within itself will be capable of attaining that GFSI benchmark without having to add on specific modules. Now, the 8 white squares you see above and below the core standard are the modules. These are scope-based modules for facilities that are required based on the scope of your operation. So these are not voluntary add-ons that you can choose, but during your application, a facility will note the scope of their operations, and these modules will be added on by the certification body based on that scope. So we have animal welfare, ready-to-eat, low-acid canned foods, effluent discharge, remote environmental effluent discharge, finished product testing, product identity preservation, and outsourcing. I'll go through all of those individually quite soon. And I just want to point, lastly, the 2 sort of light blue squares on the left are the 2 available options for social accountability auditing during the seafood processing standard. This, what you see on the bottom is the social accountability module. This is the basic essential social accountability checklist that could be conducted by a seafood processing standard auditor. Above it is the enhanced social module. This is a standalone enhanced social module that would be conducted concurrently with the seafood processing standard, but done with a specialized social auditor on an unannounced basis and following a few other strict criteria to be aligned with the Sustainable Seafood Supply Chain benchmark. Again, I'll go through those a little bit more, but that is really the only voluntary module here. Is you can opt into the enhanced social module. If you do not choose that one, then you are required to go through the social accountability module. Before we go through each component, just to mention the benefits of the modular approach. And this is not an exhaustive list by any standpoint, just some thoughts that we've determined through this process. For facilities, we definitely feel that this will provide much higher level of customization for each facility to provide a more streamlined and simplified audit process that still provides the same level of assurance that the previous version did. It should help assist with auditor availability as you get more specified auditors for the scope of operations. It will help with facilities that do work in the wild capture space be more responsive to their needs. And down the line should have the easy addition of an SSCI benchmarked certification product if that is of interest. For certification bodies, we are hoping that this will provide more flexibility for auditor competency and selection so that there is a little bit more freedom of choice when assigning auditors to facilities. And over time, we do believe that this will lead to greater overall industry interest in seafood processing standard as it becomes more applicable, more accessible, and more efficient for everyone. Now, to walk through the components here, we will start with core. As I mentioned, core is the main central component of this standard that contains all of the relevant global food safety initiative benchmarking requirements, and all of the clause requirements within the core standard will be subject to any facility applying to SPS 6.0. So core is what any facility applying to SPS can expect to be audited against every single time. Now looking at the scope-based modules. Again, these are all of the modules that during the application, you will answer a number of targeted questions to determine the scope of your operations. This will get reviewed by GSA and the assigned certification body to determine which modules are necessary to effectively certify that facility's operations. So the first we'll talk about here is the ready-to-eat food module. The objective here is to assure that best practices are used to minimize food safety risks during the processing of ready-to-eat products. The scope will be any facilities producing raw or cooked fishery products intended to be consumed without further cooking or processing. This results in a checklist that has increased focus on the environmental monitoring plan, specifically as it relates to listeria. And there's also expected requirements around cross-contamination prevention, added specific requirements for maintenance personnel, and some additional thoughts around laundry service validation. Some good examples here that are very different from each other, but raw chilled or frozen fish that is direct for consumption to consumers, or prepared ready-to-eat seafood products such as a surimi. So this does cover a range of products, but any facility that is producing ready-to-eat seafood in any capacity will be subject to this module. The next, which is similar, is the low-acid canned food module. This applies to any facility that is doing seafood processing in hermetically sealed containers that receives heat treatment for the purpose of achieving commercial sterility. The goal here is, again, to utilize best practices to minimize food safety risks and regulatory requirements for ready-to-eat canned or pouched seafood. This does have some increased auditor competency expectations around expert knowledge of lethality processes in low-acid canned food production. And additionally, more clauses have been added that are specific to the canning process to help validate these operations. Finished product testing. This might be one of the more significant changes to the seafood processing standard moving forward. And I'm going to just start with that and get into the details. Moving into SPS 6.0, we will no longer be requiring mandatory finished product testing for all facilities. It will now be conducted on a risk-based basis. So To say that again, not all facilities applying for SPS 6.0 will be required to conduct finished product testing every time. It is only those facilities deemed high risk using the guidance document that has been posted on the Global Seafood Alliance websites. So the objective of the finished product testing module, again, is to conduct finished product testing to assess the facility's control over potential microbiological and chemical residue hazards. Again, the scope of this is facilities that fall under elevated and high-risk categories. This, again, can be found online if you look for the finished product testing guidance document. That is a standalone document that will go through the process for determining a facility's risk level. The animal welfare module. The animal welfare module currently is a module looking to achieve an assurance that the transportation, holding, stunning, and slaughtering of live animals incorporates animal welfare best practices and minimizes distress from farm-raised aquatic species. As of this time, the scope is any facility that is conducting transportation, holding, stunning, and slaughtering of live farm-raised aquatic species. I do want to note specifically that this only relates to farm-raised products at this time. We do intend to fold animal welfare considerations into wild capture seafood processors in the future. However, throughout the development process, consensus around best practice in that space was insufficient at best, and we did not feel like there was enough consistent guidance to lead us towards auditable clauses in the wild capture space. So that is an area that we remain quite focused on moving forward, but for now, the animal welfare module does only apply to facilities handling live farm-raised aquatic species. We have two different modules related to effluent discharge. The first and the probably most widely applicable will be the generic effluent discharge module. The objective here is obviously to assure that facilities are discharging into naturally occurring water bodies, minimize their adverse environmental impacts to that habitat. The scope of this is for the effluent discharge requirements for both wild capture and aquaculture facilities that are not located in remote locations. I'll follow up on that shortly. And lastly, there are different options for facilities to manage this module based on the conditions at the site. So obviously, a facility that has permitted dumping into a municipal system is going to have different clause expectations than a facility that is dumping effluent directly into a naturally occurring water body. So this module covers all of those different situations and assures that whatever effluent management strategy is being used is done according to best practice. Now, we did add another module for effluent discharge, and this was largely in response to conversations and education around some portions of the remote wild-caught industry. So there are a number of processors that only work in the wild capture industry that lack sufficient regulatory guidance to meet the seafood processing standard as it lives, and have kind of different baseline expectations around effluent management. So this module is available only for seafood processing facilities that only process wild-caught material and are located in what is defined as a remote location. For the purpose of this module, we use a definition built through the United States Geological Survey that defines remote as a processing facility located more than 30 minutes by land or sea away from a metropolitan area with a population of 10,000 people or greater. So combining that definition of a remote facility with those that are only processing wild-caught products would allow you to be audited under the remote caught environmental effluent module instead of the standard effluent module. I hope that makes sense. Just a few more to go here. We have the outsourcing module. As described, the goal of this is to demonstrate that facilities are exercising proper control over any outsourced processes, verifying that all 4 pillars of SPS are met as relevant. So the scope of this are any facilities that outsource any processes that have an impact on food safety, legality, quality, traceability, or social responsibility. All outsourcing activities must be covered under this module. So some examples that we've seen of outsourcing activities that would fall under this include filleting sites, packing sites, freezing sites, or facilities that may do storage or removing of pin bones. So really any processing type of activity that occurs outside of the facility must be contained under the outsourcing module. Really, and it's a focus here on making sure that the main processing facility can demonstrate high levels of control around all 4 pillars to these outsourced sites. Product identity preservation. For now, this module is really related to the BAP star status logo. So the objective of this module is to maintain the chain of custody, what we call the product identity, as well as the integrity of any product that's going through the SPS production process. So for now, the scope is farm product with multi-star claims that are labeled, claimed, or sold in any way as 2, 3, or 4-star product. So any seafood processing facility that is processing our farmed product and is connecting it in any way to certified BAP farms, hatcheries, and feed mills will be subject to the product identity preservation module. So essentially, this module relates to any star status claims above 1 star. Lastly, on modules here is social accountability. As I mentioned, we have 2 different modules for social accountability. One that is optional, and the second would be mandatory if you do not choose the optional one. So to start, we have the social responsibility module. This is the standard set of social responsibility criteria that would be audited by the assigned seafood processing standard auditor. And it would be for any facilities not opting into the enhanced social module. So again, if you do not choose the enhanced social module, you will be audited against the social responsibility module. To look at the enhanced social module a little bit more deeply, again, this is an optional voluntary audit component that helps producers further improve the safety and well-being of employees and get market recognition for doing so. A few key details about the enhanced social module for the audit itself. This is available to any processing plant certifying to SPS 6.0. It is written with the intention to be benchmarked to the Sustainable Supply Chain Initiative, apologies. And we will intend to start pursuing that benchmark as soon as we are ready to do so with the module. If a facility does choose the enhanced social module, this will result in an unannounced audit by an APSCA certified social compliance auditor who will accompany the lead SPS auditor. So if you are opting into an enhanced social module as a facility, you are opting into 2 auditors showing up unannounced, one of which is a trained, qualified social auditor. The other one would be a trained, qualified seafood processing standard auditor. Additionally, the enhanced social audit conducted by this APSCA auditor is expected to conduct this in no less than half the time required to conduct the entire SPS audit, ensuring that the social component is given ample time to visit all required areas, review all relevant information, and undertake any necessary interviews or follow-up audit actions to confirm findings throughout the site. So this is a significantly larger expectation for facilities when they undertake the enhanced social module. But this, over time, we do hope there will be some strong external recognition of that audit as well. through the SSCI benchmark. Last feature here of 6.0 that we just want to quickly touch on. We had done a webinar about this a few months ago, but just want to remind that GSA is working very closely with the organization Fish Choice to develop mechanisms to connect the seafood processing standard to recognized fishery improvement projects to increase traceability and recognition within the market. So I won't go through all of the detail on this slide, but essentially GSA has determined through a few key data points and expectations of fishery improvement projects that we can provide traceability validation of FIP material through a seafood processing standard. In conversations with the marketplace and NGOs engaging in fishery improvement projects, extending that traceability element down to the fishery and the vessel level has been a very difficult objective and something that has not been easily achieved, and there have not been a lot of deep incentives to achieve this. We do believe in conversations with the marketplace that providing a legitimate pathway to recognize FIP traceability through the seafood processing standard will provide a much better market access and potential opportunity for growth and improvement and advancement in these FIPs that would undergo these assessments. If you do have any other information on this project, I'd be more than happy to discuss with you further after the webinar. Last but not least, the implementation timeline for SPS 6. This standard was published on November 4th of this year, and we are now openly accepting applications for SPS 6.0 under the pilot status. So these would be unbenchmarked certificates achieved to help move us forward under this pilot process. Starting in spring of next year, we will be conducting the first open auditor training against SPS 6.0. So we've been conducting limited auditor trainings for pilots as of now, but starting this spring, we will be doing an open auditor training for the standard. In the middle part of next year, we expect the standard to be fully active and accepting applications by any facilities. And then by November 5th, 2025, so basically a year from the publication date, SPS 6.0 will become mandatory for all new processing applicants, and we will no longer be accepting applications to SPS 5.1. So over the next year, we are in our implementation period and strongly encourage certified facilities to look towards pilot certifications to help understand the new standard and where they may fall out under that new audit program to be better prepared for the required implementation moving into 2026. With that, I'd just like to thank everybody for their time today. We really appreciate your attention. I do see we have some questions starting to build up in the chat box. So I'll invite my colleagues Murali and Amy to join me here. And we will start publishing some questions for answers online. Okay. All right, let's start. I think the first one I see here might be from Guillermo on risk status here. So we have a question on the finished product. So Murali, this would be probably for you. The question would be, why do medium risk plants not require finished product analysis? I would think that based on high, medium, and low risk, medium risk plants would require less frequent analysis rather than none, for example, only during the audit with the auditor present. So Murali, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the kind of the reasoning behind the medium risk status and what the role is there in the finished product testing module.
Yeah, the way the risk status is currently set up is either low or elevated or high risk. So any facilities within the high and elevated risk, probably that's what Guillermo is trying to say. We don't have a medium, but that's what probably falls under elevated risk. So any facility falling under elevated and high risk will have to undergo testing. Only low risk is exempted from testing. And I mean, the module goes into details of what needs to be tested, what is the frequency, and how is compositing to be done, and what the auditor needs to collect during the audit, and all of these details. I mean, I don't want to go into those details. That's a complete 13 or 14-page document. But I would say that both elevated, which is kind of, we can say it's medium, and high-risk facilities must undergo testing of the finished products, and only low risk is exempted from testing the finished product at this point.
Thank you, Murali. I see one more question about finished product testing here. Let's do that just while we're on the subject. So this one's from Matthew. In regards to the finished product testing module, while a facility may not be required, based on the risk assessment level, they can still opt to include that module, correct?
The facility may not be required based on the risk assessment. Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, when you answer the questions during the application, you might say, I am low risk, and then that would kind of opt you out of that module, but then the auditor will verify that during the audit. So that's what happens, and will then assess whether you really fall under low risk or elevated risk or high risk. And that's how that module will come into play.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, just to bop around, I see a few questions on the enhanced social side, so let's go to that. Starting with this one, Amy, if you go with the enhanced social audit, will it be treated as two separate audits with separate reports and billed accordingly, or is it part of the same audit? One should publish here shortly. There we go. And this is from Nathan.
So if you go for an enhanced social audit, you'll have the SPS auditor as the lead auditor, and then you'll have an additional auditor who's an APSCA CSCA auditor. In most cases, the two will be doing the audit together. They'll come together and do the audit, but there will be additional charges since there's an additional auditor who's there for additional time. And it will be part of the same report.
Perfect. And this one might be a combination of the two of you here, but another question on the enhanced social module. Does the enhanced social module only cover the primary plant, but not outsourcing locations?
So yeah, the enhanced social module covers the primary plant, and outsourcing is dealt with in the outsourcing module.
So we would not be conducting an enhanced social audit at these outsourcing locations with the APSCA auditor, correct?
Yeah, not necessarily. It all depends on where the outsourcing is located and those aspects. So for example, outsourcing just next door, probably we could include that as part of the audit. But if outsourcing is in a different province or a state, then the outsourcing module has built-in requirements that the primary facility has to conduct their due diligence or audits and things like that. So that's what falls into the scope of outsourcing a module.
Perfect. Thank you, Murali. So a little bit about another question about the kind of the implementation phase here. Let's see if we can get it posted up. So the question would be, how are clients expected to update to this version? Is it mandatory for the facility's internal auditors? Would there be nonconformities if a facility's internal auditor, I would assume, has not yet taken awareness of this new version? Again, I would just point you back to the implementation timeline we've provided, and ultimately it comes down to the scope of the application. So facilities will have the option to apply to issue 5.1 until November 5th of next year. So if they are going through a 5.1 audit and are not fully up to date on 6.0 during that time, that there is no nonconformity. However, if it is after that November 5th date, or they are, in a pilot process and are unaware of the new requirements, then yes, I would imagine that nonconformity would follow there. Morale, do you have any other follow-ups on that one?
Yeah, the second part of the probably the second or third part of the question. Yes, the internal auditors, if they have to audit against SPS 6.0, they have to be trained. Otherwise, how do they audit it, right? So it's logical that they need to be trained before they audit internally for the facility that's applying under 6.0.
Perfect. Another kind of process question, which I think is a very good question to answer right now. The question would be, how will the audit duration be calculated based on the core standard and the modules? It should pop up here just a second. And that is exactly what we are, there it is. That is exactly what we will be focused on internally with GSA this year. And that is largely the goal of our pilot audit process, is to help confirm the exact duration details before the mandatory go live next year. So as we have already conducted a number of pilot audits against 6.0, as I mentioned, we are looking to continue to do more of these, but we are using these pilot audits to help determine total audit duration. I think we have some general ideas based on the history of 5.1, but we are remaining fairly open-minded as we look through the results of these pilot audits over the course of 2024 and 2025. Here's a fun one, Morale. Does the traceability module, so for us, that would be the product identity preservation for BAP. There's also traceability elements within the core itself. But the question would be, does the traceability module or traceability elements of SPS connect with the new FDA rule for traceability? So I believe we're talking about FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. Morale, I was wondering if you could comment on this.
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. It would connect to the new, but we are just looking into if there is anything specific with the FDA new rule for traceability. And if something is missing, probably those aspects would be included. But yes, they would correlate to the new FDA traceability rules.
Perfect. And I think we will have some more information on this in the year to come, but GSA is working on some technological tools to help support this digital traceability element as well. So while the goal of this webinar is really to talk about the content of SPS 6.0, I do think we'll have some upcoming webinars talking more about the traceability side and how we're hoping to help provide some better access there as well. So great question. We keep moving here. I think we've worked through a lot of these. Next question relates to the outsourcing module. Will external laundry be covered by the outsourcing module? I think at a high level, the answer is if it does have an impact on food safety, legality, traceability, worker health and safety, then yes, it would be relevant. But Morale, if there's anything additional.
Yeah, the laundry does not handle any product. It handles the PPE and accessories. So it does not fall under the outsourcing model, because the outsourcing model is specific to product being outsourced to another entity and being brought into the primary facility. So anything other than the product itself would fall under supplier contracted processes, which means they'll be auditing their suppliers or controlling their suppliers with other measures like either COAs or certifications or various. There are various ways or methods to do that. But no, the laundry wouldn't generally fall under the outsourcing, because that's for the product that's being processed.
Thank you. All right, the next one right below that was the antibiotic testing section removed? No, it was not. It did just get moved out into a module with the finished product testing module. So I believe that is moved into the risk-based testing program. Next question, I think this is another helpful one to quickly discuss. We won't get into the details of this, but this is a good reminder for everyone. The question is, are changes in the core of the standard, are there changes in the core of the standard, or is it just structural changes? Meaning, are there new requirements or clauses to meet? That's a good question. So while the major intent of the SPS 6.0 redesign was to change the structure of it so that it is more friendly towards facilities' scope of operations, there were certainly some updates to the standard itself to stay up to date with best practice based on guidance from the technical committee and other key stakeholders. While there are a lot of components that have stayed similar, many clauses have been reworded for clarity or to update based on changes in science and things like that. So I would, and especially in the social accountability sections, I would say that there are probably a good number of clause changes as well. So I would make sure to do a thorough comparison between these core requirements to help understand where these differences are, because yes, there are some different expectations in the clauses as well. Let's see. I have another one on enhanced social from Priscilla. So the question here is, if we have the enhanced social audit, both auditors must enter the processing area in the 30 minutes required being unannounced. So Amy, I believe we're just asking about what the exact parameters around the unannounced audit window would be and what the expectations would be if a facility signs up for an unannounced audit.
Yeah, I think this is getting at when you have an unannounced audit, when the auditors arrive, they need to do a quick walkthrough of the facility before they have the opening meeting.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So there is an expectation that they will walk the facility floor before meeting with staff as part of the unannounced component. All right. A question around GFSI. So the question is, now that GFSI will publish their benchmark review to the new version the new 2024 version in a short time, will the SPS be changed again? No, we do not intend for that to happen. I think GSA is highly engaged with GFSI as an organization. We're in communication with them many, many times throughout the year. So we have been following the redevelopment process. So we will, as changes to the GFSI framework comes up, GSA will be sure to keep the public aware of how that would affect standards and the status of the benchmark for both 5.1 and 6.0 moving forward. However, at this time, we believe that the standards as written will maintain adherence to GFSI's food safety requirements. One question asking for the document for the defining facility as low, medium, high risk. That can be found on the BAP standards page online. That is called the Finished Product Testing Module Annex 1 Guidance Document. So that is available for download on our website, in addition with all of the standard materials we've discussed today. So another implementation question here. After November 5th, 2025, can a certified client get the certificate as per SPS version 5.1? This is a slightly complicated question, as the day you apply to SPS is not the day you get audited, obviously. So there are some longer timelines here about If we are closing off applications November of next year, there will certainly be some facilities that would receive a 5.1 audit after that fact. So I don't believe GSA has published a firm date on when the last SPS 5.1 audit will be conducted. But yes, the marketplace could likely expect there to be S 5.1 certificates out in the world, through the early part of 2026 as well.
May I add something, David?
Yeah, please, Murali.
Yeah, how this works is we cannot determine when the last audit will occur because there are various processes and methods between the application and the audit. So the application, we do have, like you mentioned, we do have a cutoff for the applications, and the audit could occur beyond that date. And then obviously, once the audit occurs to 5.1, the certificate would be issued, after 60 days or so. So that's the timeline for certificate. So yes, the answer is yes, they would be issued, but it depends on when they applied. So.
I was muted. Thank you. Oh, here's a good question for you, Murali. Is there any impact reference to HACCP Codex Alimentarius with the newest version?
I don't think there is any impact as long as all the seafood hazards are covered. But being a seafood specific standard, we have always defaulted to a US FDA Seafood Hazards and Controls Guide. That will still continue as a default guide. But then, having said that, if somebody has used HACCP Codex Alimentarius and covered all the hazards related to the seafood that's being processed, I don't think there would be any impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Amy, a kind of a generic question on enhanced social, but I think it might be helpful since you're the expert here. So the question is, can you please describe again the benefits of the enhanced social audit? So, beyond having a dedicated trained social auditor on site and the unannounced and the increased audit duration, I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about some of the unique elements within the enhanced social module that differentiate it from the social module. Just some high level thoughts there.
Well, yeah, the enhanced social module will have some additional clauses, so it does allow you to get a better idea and dig in a little bit deeper on the social issues. And it's also beneficial because an enhanced social module would be a social compliance audit. So if you need a social compliance audit for the people that you're selling to, that would fulfill that requirement.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So a question on auditor training here. Waiting for that one to come up. So can present SPS 5.1 approved auditors, will they need to take training on SPS 6.0 through GSA or their CB? So yes, with this version update, we will need all qualified auditors to retake SPS 6.0 training in order to be qualified to conduct SPS 6.0 audits. As we mentioned before, we did take a little bit of a look at auditor competency as it relates to processing for this new updated standard, so that we're making sure that we're not assigning auditors with the wrong scope of expertise to certain facilities, or sending overqualified ones in the sense of having, for example, sending an auditor that has a deep background in ready-to-eat processing to a facility that doesn't do it when we have a backlog of facilities that need that type of audit done. These sorts of changes might occur here from an auditor allocation standpoint. So yes, we do expect all auditors to go through a GSA conducted SPS 6.0 training. As mentioned, that will be first made available this coming spring, and those dates will be announced rather shortly. Sorry, just looking through some of the last questions here, folks. Another question on ESA, Amy, related to when and how these can be conducted. If the ESA is conducted separately from the SPS audit, how long apart can these audits be, and would it still be accepted? So I think just a general question around, firstly, does the enhanced social audit need to be done concurrently with the SPS 6.0 audit, or can it be done as a follow-up supplement?
So the goal is to do everything possible to have the SPS and enhanced social done together. However, there are reasons for scheduling, or perhaps a facility has been asked for a social compliance audit after they've had their SPS audit, so the enhanced social can be done separately as a supplemental audit.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, a food safety question, Morali. We'll just get through a couple more of these, folks, and then we probably won't be able to get through everyone's questions today. I apologize, but we will do our best to follow up with those over email over the coming weeks here. So this one should be publishing shortly, Morali, but the questions were, here it is. Are PCQI and FDQI, so Food Defense Qualified Individual, are these recognitions mandatory for factory personnel exporting to the U.S. because this is required by FDA regulations?
Yes, they are, because it's a legal requirement. So because of that, it's mandatory that they have the PCQI and FDQI, and those would be covered under Section 1, though it does not specifically state PCQI. I mean, the core module Section 1 does not state that, but they will have to be covered because that's the regulatory framework for anybody exporting to USA, and some other country could have a specific requirement for that particular country or region. So yes, that's a requirement.
Perfect. And a question that was related to that was, does the new standard require HACCP team to hold the PCQI training? Sounds like if the exporting country regulations requires it, then yes.
Yes, yeah. At least one has to have the PCQI training. That's the requirement. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Let's see here. Next one is, and this is a good question. I think it does relate to the significance of this update. Will all changes from the current standards be redlined and highlighted in SPS 6.0? We tried very hard to conduct a redline exercise on SPS 6.0. And as I mentioned, there were quite a bit of content changes, but also just so much architecture change to the standard that we found that a redline document was basically unreadable. So we are strongly encouraging facilities and certification bodies and everyone to kind of look at SPS 6.0 as a brand new standard document and start to get comfortable with it and the new design and implementation of it now, so that when these mandatory dates come, there will be a lot more familiarity with it. So we do apologize that this change is significant enough where a red line was not possible. We do have some change summaries within the core standard, but if you do have questions about comparing back to 5.1 or understanding certain changes from 5.1 to 6.0, Program Integrity would be more than happy to sit down with you and help answer those questions.
And just to add one more thing, David, is auditors would know once they start auditing against the standard, they would know that this was a particular clause in 5.1, or maybe something has changed with this particular clause.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So let's see here. We have a few questions. So one here is, what website do we check to verify what plants are SPS/GFSI certified? The BAPA website doesn't indicate that it is GFSI. So just a point of clarification there, any facility certified to seafood processing 5.1 has the GFSI benchmark. The standard itself is fully benchmarked, so any facility certified to it also carries the benchmark, which is why we do not note specific facilities that would have a GFSI on the website, because they all do. As of now, the SPS 6.0 has not achieved the GFSI benchmark, as you need a certain number of certificates achieved and things like that. But once that is benchmarked, then all SPS 6.0 facilities would also be able to claim the GFSI benchmark. There's a few general questions that I'll try to follow up with without posting, just because we're about at time here. First is around accreditation and GSA's thoughts and plans around accreditation. So GSA works towards getting all of its BAP standards accredited by external organizations, or have the CBs accredited to our standards. So we do intend to get SPS 6.0 accredited across all of the certification bodies that will be conducting audits against it. That does take some time, but GSA, per your question, does put a fair bit of importance and stock into getting all of these standards accredited through our CBs, and that is the same intention for SPS 6.0. Lastly, I do see a few number of questions about different language translations for SPS 6.0. As people are likely familiar, the BAP program does need to operate in a single language. So English is the sort of the business language of the BAP program in terms of communicating with certification bodies and audit reports. However, audits are often conducted in other languages, and we recognize the need for translated documents. So yes, we will be working to provide some translated versions of 6.0 moving forward. It is a bit of a process to make sure that translations are exactly as intended, given that wording is such an important part of standards in general. But yes, over the coming months and year or two, you could expect some notification about some translated versions of the standard to become available. So I think with that, we will probably wrap up for the day. Again, thank you everyone so much for your time and attention and all of the questions. We are really looking forward to getting SPS 6.0 out into the marketplace. We think it will bring a lot of great value for everyone up and down the supply chain. So again, thank you everyone for your interest. Thank you to Amy and Morali for all of your help and support today. We will look to follow up over email with some of the questions we've received. And again, please reach out if you have any other further questions, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.